Okay, I think we're going to go ahead and get started. Kathleen, can everybody hear me okay?
Think so. Got a
All
lot of
right,
thumbs
good,
up.
good deal. Hey, welcome everyone. My name is Jeff Burkhart. I'm the Executive Director of the Texas Indigent Defense Commission. Just so you know, before we get started, this part is being recorded. After we finish the recorded part, we're going to stop and have Q&A. We're not going to record the Q&A, so you can ask anything you want. But this part of the presentation, we're going to record. It has been an unbelievable couple of weeks. I don't think any of us has ever lived through anything quite like this. And in addition to our own families and friends who are facing coronavirus, we have to think about what this all means for our clients. And I know you all are struggling with this just like we are too. In the midst of that too, we have added online courts in Texas. So, and Kathleen will talk about this in a few minutes. Just Thursday night, the Office of Court Administration announced that it will add 3,000 Zoom channels so that every court or nearly every court in Texas can go online. That's, as far as we can tell, unprecedented in the United States, that so many courts would go online so quickly. This is the comment from David Slayton, the Director of the Office of the Court Administration. Our intention is that we have as many judges as possible, if not all judges, using that technology to be able to conduct both their essential proceedings and even non-essential proceedings that maybe are not as urgent but still need to occur via that video, and allowing everyone, including the parties themselves, to join. So that's what OCA is talking about. That's what they've launched. One of the things that we're concerned about, this launched, like I said, just on Thursday. You know, you all really have to be the experts on this. You know, we can't rely on the judges being the experts on using Zoom or the legality of some of the motions or proceedings that may take place, just like you have to be experts on evidence in criminal procedure, in criminal law. You now have to figure out how to become an expert on this, on online court proceedings. And that's, frankly, it's a big change for all of us. It's a big change at TIDC, TCDLA, and we're here to support you in any way we can. I want to thank Kathleen for putting this together so quickly. Like I said, really Friday was the very first day that we had any sort of sense that this was going to happen. And she was able to put together this presentation over the weekend. So on one business day, Kathleen Casey Gomez, who's going to lead you today, was able to put together this presentation. What are we talking about today? Today is really focused on the basics of Zoom. We'll get into some of the more advanced features. We'll talk about potential pitfalls. But even if you've used Zoom before, as we have been using it for about 1.5 years for various meetings, it's a little bit different to use it for court proceedings. So that's what we're going to focus on today. One of the things that we won't really cover today is that, sorry, hold on 1 second, get a message, let me click this out. One of the things we won't really focus on today is case law review and litigating issues that relate to online courts. We hope to do a follow-up presentation on that, and we'll hope you join us for that as well. But that's going to be a big issue. Once you actually know how to use Zoom and use it for court proceedings, it's important to start thinking about the issues. Confrontation clause issues that might pop up, issues regarding public viewing of court proceedings. You know, does it suffice that it's actually going to be streamed via Facebook or YouTube? And we don't know the answers to a lot of those questions yet. So we hope to have a follow-up proceeding. But again, today is really just focused on what, basically how do you use Zoom in this kind of context. So with that, again, we're all kind of flying by the seat of our pants, but we really hope this presentation is helpful. And again, Kathleen's put together something pretty incredible for the short amount of time that we had. So we'll jump into it right now. And Kathleen, do you want to take it away?
All right, thanks, Jeff. Before we get started, I know, can the majority of people, and just give me a thumbs up, can you see the PowerPoint presentation right now? All right, great. Excellent. All right, so let's get started. Once again, as Jeff said, this is all really an evolving process. We've really only known about these online courts for a couple days, but there is precedent for this, and there are courts that are already doing online hearings, as we heard both earlier when folks were getting online. And we know that this is already allowed by Article 27.18. Again, we're not going to go into the case law on this today, but I really wanted to flag this for you in terms of what are the requirements to do an online plea or waiver of rights by video conference. Now, Zoom basics. This is going to be extremely granular, but there's a reason for it. I want you to be able to understand really the ins and outs of Zoom so that you're able to assist both your client and perhaps other people in the courtroom, other parties, in making sure that things run smoothly. Like I said, we'll have some time at the end of the call for questions, and I'm making myself available to you. My email will be available if you have further questions after this presentation today. So first of all, what is Zoom? Well, it's kind of almost silly, right? We're all on it right now, so you've already mastered logging on. But to kind of go a little more in depth, it's a cloud-based video communication platform. You can use it on a computer, a phone, or a tablet. You can host video conferences like the one we're having today. You can do presentations, and you can also have one-on-one client meetings. It's extremely important to note that you do not have to buy a Zoom license to participate. I've had a number of questions about that. Do I need to pay for the basic tier of Zoom is about $14.99 a month. Don't think you have to buy that. There might be reasons you want to invest in that to have that higher tier, but you're not required to buy a license to participate. Your clients are not required to buy a license to participate in a Zoom call. What are the minimum requirements to run this program successfully? They're right here. First of all, you need an internet connection with broadband or wireless is ideal. You need speakers and a microphone and a webcam or a high definition webcam. Now, if you're watching this presentation from a cell phone, obviously it already has speakers and a microphone, but that might not be the case if you're on a desktop computer or a laptop. So before, and again, when we're thinking about this from the level of representation, you don't only have to think about your setup, but also the setup that your client might have or the setup that the jail has if your client is in custody. So as we're beginning our checklist of how do we practice online, we'll always want to check what is the setup where my client is being held, or if my client's at home, what is the capability that they have. I'm going to send this PowerPoint out over the TCDLA listserv, and so you won't have to write any of this down or take notes. And part of that reason is I've included some really helpful links in here. The Zoom Help Center has all kinds of great videos, and it has a breakdown of the specific requirements for every supported device and every operating system. So no matter what possible setup you have, Zoom will tell you whether or not it will work well on that computer. Because Zoom can work, but that doesn't always mean it works well, and you really want to make sure you have an optimum setup. Now, here's another point I want to make really quickly. Don't rely on other people to confirm the tech specifications. I would really suggest that you take it upon yourself to ensure that whatever setup your client or the jail has will work with Zoom. Again, because this is so new, unfortunately, people don't even know, and some of these technology terms are new, like broadband, 3G, 4G, LTE. So, it's a whole new vocabulary that we're having to learn, but once you master it, it'll be pretty simple. So talking about minimum bandwidth requirements, since I've been working with Zoom, the number one problem I find is the bandwidth. So in a kind of colloquial sense, bandwidth, you can think of that as the size of the internet pipe and the amount of data able to go through it at any one time. Again, I'm going to send this presentation to you so you don't have to write this down, but right here I list the minimum requirements for both one-to-one video calling and for group video calling, in terms of what numbers you need to see and what speeds your internet needs to be able to handle. So 600 kilobytes per second up down for high quality video and 1.2 megabytes per second for HD video. And then you can see for the group calling as well. But how do I determine how fast my internet is? Because I know if you're anything like me, your internet company tells you one thing, and then when you log on, you get a different speed, right? Well, there's a really simple way to test, and you can actually use Google for this. And if you want to open a second screen and do this while we're talking, I won't be offended. But all you do is you go to google.com and you type in speed test. And what this will raise for you is an internet speed test that will tell you how fast your connection is. So this is extremely valuable. It's completely free. And it's something you can do. You can ask the jail to do it. You can ask your clients to do it if they're out of custody and they'll be attending a video hearing. And here's what you'll see. First thing you'll see, we're going left to right, is you'll see kind of almost a speedometer. And it will tell you, these were screenshots I took actually over the weekend as I was testing my own internet connection. It will clock how fast you can download, how fast you can upload, and then the last screen is the one that's really important. You can see here that it'll just tell you in plain language, here it says, my internet speed is fast, and that the connection should be able to handle multiple devices streaming HD video at the same time. So this is a really easy shorthand way, and frankly, you might want to check your connection pretty regularly at the moment, because unfortunately, because everybody's working online, the entire infrastructure for our networks are kind of overloaded. So if you have an important hearing, I would use Google to check your speed to make sure that everything's on the up and up for the day. Another question that I've received a lot is whether or not you need to download a program for Zoom. That is to say, you can open Zoom through the web, just in a web browser page, and I'm sure several of you did that today. But as practitioners, I would really recommend that you download the Zoom desktop client if your computer has that capability. Obviously, if you're watching today on a cell phone or an iPad, you've already downloaded the app. But regardless, the link that I've provided in the PowerPoint here, you can see it along the bottom there. That's where you can send anybody, whether it's fellow attorneys who need this or whomever, they can go to that one web page and download what they need depending on their computer, which is extremely useful that Zoom does that. So now, those are the basics of Zoom. We now know how to check our internet speed. We understand that if you can download the program, that's better than not downloading it. But here's some advanced Zoom techniques that I've seen that the courts are using. So first things first, we're going to go across the kind of control bar. And some of these seem very basic, but we're just going to go over them just so that you're aware. First of all, you know that you can mute yourself at any time, and you can start and stop your video at any time. This can be extremely useful. For example, if there might be times you want to turn off your video temporarily, you can do that very easily. You can share your screen, which we'll talk about more in a minute. That's actually what I'm doing right now. You can chat with either the group or individuals, and several of you have actually been able to chat with me this morning as we've worked through a few technical issues. You can record the meeting and download it right to your computer. And depending on the setup that your court may have, you can raise your hand or give thumbs up, which is a reactions. For some big meetings, you know, it might be cumbersome, so Zoom has built in this capability, which can be quite useful. Like I said, the chat function is going to be probably very important when it comes to these online hearings. And again, all you have to do to chat is click on that little chat bubble. There's something really important I'd like to highlight here. You can send a chat to everyone, and you can send a chat to individuals. But just as a little practice tip, please be very mindful of when you're chatting and to whom you're chatting. You know, this is something where you don't want to accidentally divulge something if you're trying to chat with your client, and you don't want to send a message to everyone, and vice versa. You might want to send a broadcast message to everyone, and you might be sending it privately so the right people aren't seeing it. Now, let's talk about how to share your screen. I think this is going to be a very important tool that is used quite a bit with these online hearings. To share your screen, it's actually pretty self-explanatory. You click on this green Share Screen button, and then this is the window that will pop up. What's really neat about Zoom is that you can share a whole screen. You can share just a program. As you can see here, when I was building this presentation, I have a 2-screen setup, so I could either share my primary screen or my secondary screen. But I also was working on a Word document. So you can also just share a Word document and not share your entire screen. So that's a really nice way to control what you're actually sharing with the people in the call. There's also a whiteboard function, which is extremely useful. If you click on the Advanced tab that you can see at the top, there's also other ways you can share. You can share just a portion of your screen, which can be useful if there's notes you don't want to, show to the whole group. You can share just the computer sound, and there's actually a way to share content from a second camera, kind of like how we used to do with projectors. So that's another really great function that I haven't tested out yet, but I think that's something that will become very useful. This is the other really big thing that I think practitioners need to be aware of, and it's based on the hearing that I've watched and just some other conversations I've had. Zoom gives you the capability to create what they're calling breakout rooms. And so what that means is that right now we're all in one big virtual room together, but whoever's running the call can actually place you in a smaller group with just a few people, or frankly by yourself. And these are called breakout rooms. The way that they're envisioning, it's my understanding, using this breakout room function is to potentially do this for client communication, or potentially sidebars where you need to have a conversation. So these breakout rooms, you won't have to set them up, but be aware that this capability exists. The other very important point with these breakout rooms is that they're not completely confidential. Whoever is running the meeting can pop in and out of the breakout rooms. And so you want to be very mindful to set ground rules ahead of time, where if you're using a breakout room to communicate with a client, that the judge won't pop in the middle of you saying something, or the judge, or you talking to the client. And that's why I kind of reiterate again that when you're using that chat function, continue to use the private chat function. Just because you're in a breakout room doesn't mean that your chats become private. Does that, okay, so there, I was about to ask you if that makes sense, but might be a few too many people for that. So we'll go on to the next. Oh, and then one other thing to point out, when you leave the breakout rooms, as you can see here in this graphic that I've created, make sure to click Return to Main Session. You don't want to leave the meeting, obviously, because then it's essentially like you're leaving the entire call. So these are just a few tips that really, frankly, have come from my own experience with using Zoom, and I really hope you'll find them helpful. Next thing we need to talk about are important changes from in-person hearings. First of all, the Zoom license that the Office of Court Administration purchased for the judges can have up to 500 participants. The proceedings will be broadcast via YouTube or possibly Facebook. And at the time of this recording, the Zoom recording is not considered the official record. This might change, but as of right now, that's the guidance we've received from OCA. Another really important point is that the judge can mute you or anyone else in the call. So to break these down a little bit, the first point about the number of participants. I would consider, if I was in this situation, I would potentially ask the judge to have family members of the client or other important people actually in the Zoom call. There's no technological reason that the folks can't be in the Zoom call with you, and there could be a lot of reasons why it would be useful to have them there in terms of showing support for your client, or other ways. There's also questions of whether or not YouTube or Facebook, have the same level of, obviously if you're watching on YouTube or Facebook, you aren't able to provide testimony or really participate in the hearing. For the last point about the mute, and again, right now, these hearings are really, or these online courts are really aimed at agreed dispositions and kind of low-level stuff, but depending on where this goes, you may be in a position where you're in a hearing and you need to make something part of the record. Well, the judge may put everyone on mute, kind of like I did, just so that there's no background noise, and you may not realize you were on mute and the court didn't hear what you were trying to say. So there's a lot of patience involved with these online hearings. You might have to, in the first couple, till everybody gets their feet under them, reiterate, judge, I just want to make clear this, was this heard? And frankly, that's just going to be part of the learning curve of using this software. But definitely remember that, because as I said, the mute function is just really tricky. Confidentiality is an issue with Zoom. You will need to be the guardian of confidentiality in your client's communications. On these calls so far, whether I've run Zoom meetings for TIDC or anywhere else, it's really easy to think that it's a more intimate setting than it really is. And on several calls, if you don't realize your microphone is on, you might say something, or frankly, your client might say something, not realizing that the audio was being broadcast to everyone. Going back to that issue of the breakout rooms, again, you really have to be proactive because you understand how Zoom works. You can help the court set ground rules for how you're going to guard your client's confidentiality. When are the times when you're going to have the ability to speak to your client in that breakout room and nobody's going to jump in and tell you, hey, you need to, be done. Those are the kind of things you'll need to think about. Access to technology is another issue. As we talked about earlier, Zoom works best with broadband internet and an HD camera. Not very many people have that. Frankly, the computer I use for just my, looking at Pinterest and surfing the web, it's just a $125 Chromebook. And it's not, frankly, up to the task of running Zoom calls. And we will have a lot of clients that are in that similar situation. They might not have broadband internet. They might not have access to the same technology. And hopefully through this PowerPoint presentation, which gives you those basics, you can help advocate to the court why your client may need assistance. And as Jeff said earlier, there's definitely a number of different case law issues and constitutional issues that are being raised by this technology. We can't go into them today, but by understanding the basics of what's required to run Zoom, we can now start to talk about how we address these issues. And again, I highlighted Article 27.18 again, just to highlight some of the things that I think are important about the requirement for private communication and that a record of the communication should be preserved by the court reporter. Finally, some practice tips. Watch your mute button. I know I've said that about 5 times, but I have been on a hot mic situation more than once, and I just can't tell you enough. You have to be careful, and you really have to be careful for your client. This is especially a situation if your client is in custody and they're on a video feed from an arraignment room. Again, you have to be the subject matter expert. You need to go set those ground rules and make sure that both your client can be heard and that your client isn't unnecessarily broadcast. I would suggest to you that you, in this early phase where we're still figuring out this technology, ask if you could record the proceeding yourself. it might be useful, especially as we're still figuring out how to make sure that this works, that you have an accurate record of what happened. Another really important fact is that you need to remember you're on camera and so is your client. So think like a director. You know, when we're conducting jury trials, you know, we're thinking about our body language. We're thinking about our tone of voice, our pacing. Now there's another dimension, which is camera angles, lighting, and sound quality. These are the unfortunate realities that we have to think about. But a camera, you know, for example, my camera is at eye level. I tried to position it in a way that looks like I have lots of books in my office. You know, you want to try to both put yourself in the most professional light and put your client in the most professional light. One of the things that those of you that have done online hearings might see is that, you know, sometimes our clients are in their jail clothes and the camera is 100 feet away and it's fluorescent lighting, and it definitely doesn't humanize our clients in the way that we want them to be humanized. So as much as possible where you're able to think about these things, do think about them, both for yourself, like I said, and for your client. There's an advanced feature called a virtual background, which is very useful that Zoom has if you download the desktop client. And it allows you to replace whatever background you have with a picture. So it's essentially a green screen. I have a couple very nice kind of law-related photos that I'll circulate. Those are both useful for you and your client, depending on where you are. Just to kind of, you know, especially so many of us now are trapped at home and not everybody has a nice office at home, right? You know, I saw the hearing I watched, the judge was at her kitchen table. You know, if you want to kind of mask wherever you're sitting for whatever reason, consider using that virtual background. The other thing that I would say is practice, practice, practice. I've been using Zoom almost every day for a period of time now, and I still mess things up. I still have trouble figuring out how to do things. It's such a sea change from our normal way of life, in addition to everything else that's going on. So please feel free to reach out to me, or, you know, make sure to look at those. The Zoom video how-to videos are very good. And use those advanced features, because again, we want you to be the subject matter expert to be able to teach the other people in the courtroom how to use it. And finally, we've created a TIDC online Dropbox that has online court materials. If you've never heard of Dropbox before, it's essentially just a shared web folder. When I send around the materials for this, I'll also share the link to the Dropbox, and hopefully there's all kinds of resources in there that we think you might find useful as you use this, you know, as we work through this together. Okay, so what I'm going to do right now is I'm going to stop recording, and I'm also going to stop screen sharing, and then we'll open it up for questions.